Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks for joining us for this really great forum today. This is the second session of our timely and important discussion called The Future of Healthcare, Bold Bets in Health. I'd like to thank our sponsor, which is Planned Parenthood, for its support of today's event. Innovation takes time, it takes money, but how can we balance time and dollars spent developing new technologies and treatments with what patients can afford to pay? What tweaks or changes can the healthcare ecosystem withstand in order to increase affordability and access to care? In this session, we're going to attempt to get a sense for the right balance between cost and innovation. We're going to be talking about bold bets in science and medicine. Before we get underway, a quick reminder, you can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag #TheHillHealth. We're broadcasting live and we'll take your questions throughout the program. And if the live stream goes bad, just click refresh and they tell me everything will be great. So today, we're very honored to have that my first guest really needs no introduction at this point. He's been a very good friend of mine and the Hill's, and in previous iterations of my world, we've been talking about science, pandemics, and his up at late nightmares for a long time. Dr. Anthony Fauci is director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and the chief medical advisor to the president. He's been a medical advisor to all Americans as they've navigated the pandemic. Dr. Fauci, it's great to see you again. Let me just start out. Let me just start out and say and share with our audience that as we are looking more and more at the bold bets that have led to vaccine options in a miraculously short period of time, that required investment and thinking years ago, and it required someone looking into the future. mRNA vaccines is one of these, and said, we need to do it. This is not like something rolled across and we're just reacting to it now. Can you just share with our audience what it takes to look into the future and to make those bold bets like you at the National Institute did?
Well, Steve, it's what we do all the time. It doesn't often get the bright light shown on it the way the highly successful results of the COVID-19 vaccines have. But, antedating any major application of a discovery almost invariably has a decade or two or more of fundamental, sometimes undifferentiated, basic research that then progresses to applied research that then progresses to an That's exactly what happened with SARS-CoV-2 and the COVID-19 vaccine. Years ago, we made investments in new vaccine platform technologies that could be more adaptable, quicker, and ultimately be able to serve us to rapidly respond to pandemics. Because of the flexibility of mRNA, which at the time was a completely untested in the sense of no vaccines had ever been developed with an mRNA platform. The fundamental basic research that went into the realization that an mRNA could actually serve as a vaccine was research that when it started, it had nothing to do with vaccines. It was just trying to figure out how you could induce the production of proteins in vivo in a safe, efficacious, and really expeditious manner. That was the platform technology. The other thing that was equally as important with regard to the vaccine was how do we get the right conformation of the immunogen, in this case, the spike protein, so that it's maximally immunogenic and safe. And Steve, something that you and I can both relate to, going back to our prior histories, is we borrowed from the structure-based vaccine design that we had been working successful experiments, but without getting a vaccine in HIV, when we were trying to figure out what's the right conformation of the native trimer envelope. Now, we don't have an HIV vaccine, but that same approach to structure-based vaccine design got us to the proper pre-fusion component of the spike protein, which has been spectacularly successful in our development of safe and effective vaccines for COVID-19. So the technology that started off coming to its prime with HIV was quickly applicable to SARS-CoV-2 together with the mRNA platform. And now you have a success story that is really historic in its impact.
Tony, I'm glad that you, and I want to tell our audience that you gave me permission a long time ago. I feel like I'm around royalty to call you Tony many ages ago. So, Tony, you've mentioned Zika, Ebola, HIV, AIDS. You've been around this block so many times. And I guess my unfair question to you is, over that period of time, are you heartened by what has come together? Is dealing with international collaborators around the world, with firms like Pfizer and BioNTech, CEPI, Richard Hatchett's outfit on Coalition for Economic, are we going to be able to respond to future deadly viruses and potential pandemics easier in the future? Or is each one of these a tough slog that gives you nightmares?
Well, both, Steve. I mean, I believe that it's never easy, for sure. But my experience going back now is, over 40 years in responding to threatening and sometimes catastrophic pandemic outbreaks. Way back 40 years with HIV and then everything else that you mentioned up until COVID-19. What I have experienced this time around is an extraordinary international collaboration, international coordination, public-private partnerships, the likes of which I've never seen before. I mean, our ability to interact with some of the larger pharmaceutical companies as well as biotech companies is really unprecedented. We've had investigators sharing their data literally within hours to days of getting the data, being put on public servers so that people can see the data and not waste months and months before they have access to it. So we've done much better than we've done in the past. And I believe because of this positive experience, Steve, that we will continue to do better and better and better. The problems are not going to get easier, but our approach to them are going to be better and better.
One of our questions we're looking at today is what's the ecosystem that you need to have for big bets and innovation? How do you deal as well with the cost side? And and we're also, as we just talked with Vivek Murthy, and very aware of what's happening with India and other developing parts of the world that may not have the same resources in the United States, but our health is connected to their health. I guess the question is, do we need to move that line? Do we need to think about IP protections at companies that have been able to develop a lot of this with a lot of government tax money from around the world? Or do you think that that is about right? Because I'm sort of looking at, the HIV/AIDS PEPFAR example in Africa, for instance, where we waive certain IP protections to get greater distribution of the needed drugs there. Do we need to do that kind of thing with COVID vaccines?
I think it's certainly an option that we should not take off the table. As I've said so many times over the last few weeks, I believe we have a moral obligation, Steve, to make sure that the rest of the world does not suffer and die, as it were, from something that we can help them with and help to prevent, because we have the resources. When I say we, I mean the developed world. I don't mean just the United States. And I think that we really need to, by whatever mechanism it takes, Steve, whether that involves taking a look and examining whether you want to waive patent protection, whether it means making investments in a lot of money to have tech transfer go to the developing world so they can make their own vaccines, whether or not we want to rev up and make billions more than we normally would, and essentially make it available to the developing world at a markedly reduced price. Any or all of the above is what I would say would be fine. We've got to get to the end game. And the end game is the equitable distribution of vaccines. So however we get there, it's fine with me. We just need to get there.
Tony, if I were President Biden and you were advising me, what would you be telling me by way of what we need to do better than we've done in the past in investing in science broadly? And I guess the question comes to something we talked about earlier. A lot of people think of health science almost in a silo, but we need to get achievements in that, like CRISPR or advances in mathematics or information systems or other forms of technology. They overlap, and sometimes the innovations come in that area. As you look at the scientific foundations of this country, even beyond your own purview, what would you advise the president to do with that? Are we doing enough?
Well, Steve, we've known each other a long time, so my answer is going to be the following. Since I do actually advise the president, I would like it to be when I'm in the room with him, advising him, as opposed to him finding out on television what my advice would be to him.
You can't blame me for trying. Well, let me just ask you, what do you believe we need to do by way of investing in science in this country more broadly than we have? I mean, it just occurs to me, like National Science Foundation has a little bit less than an $8 billion budget. When I found that out, I was shocked. I mean, that is a tiny bit of money that funds a lot of research. And I'm like wondering, why aren't we tripling or quadrupling that? But I'm just sort of interested in the state of scientific research, because that does lead to innovation, and you see China doing it, you see other big countries doing it. What should we be doing more, are we generally okay?
Okay, so it's a fair question. And I think I can answer it in a way that is sort of self-evident answer to your question. That if it were not for the extraordinary investment that we have made for decades at the NIH, not only at the NIH, but the grantees and contractors that we fund. If we had not done that to the extent that we did it, we would not be in a position now to be talking about getting 70% of our population vaccinated with one dose by July 4th. It just wouldn't have happened. So if ever there was a concrete example, I get asked the question often, usually when I'm before a congressional committee. And now we have the perfect answer. Like, what have you done for us lately? What has the investment in basic and applied biomedical research given to the American public and to the world? And all you got to do now is turn around and say a highly efficacious and safe group of vaccines, not one, but more than one. That's what basic research has gotten us. And that's something I think you're getting to, is that we need to continue to fund in a very robust manner fundamental basic biomedical research and not slow down on it, because it has gotten us things that would never have happened if we didn't invest, including the extraordinary array of drugs for persons with HIV that have turned it from a sure death sentence to a disease that's a chronic condition now, where people can literally lead essentially normal lives and be confident that they are not going to infect anybody else. That is the result of basic biomedical research, as is the vaccine for SARS-CoV-2.
Tony, I have, just to conclude, I have purposely not asked you anything about mask wearing. I think you get a lot of that on TV and whatnot, but I do see and know that when you speak about wearing masks, it's also empathy for other people. It's an expression of concern for other people in the wearing of masks. So I want to give you an opportunity to reflect on how important that is about basic hygiene and health in the country. But also want to ask you, because you've been at it, Larry Kramer died this past year. HIV, do you see a potential for an HIV vaccine given the advances in science, or is that going to remain elusive?
I think it's going to be very challenging, Steve, but I think now, given the new vaccine platform technologies we have, you're going to see a pivoting towards using these new technologies to to develop an HIV vaccine. So although it's been very challenging, we've been at it for a very long time. The science has been exquisite. I mean, incredibly elegant science. I think if we keep pursuing that pathway, that ultimately we will get a safe and effective vaccine. As difficult as it is, I believe we will do it.
Wow. Well, we'll leave it there. Dr. Anthony Fauci, Chief Medical Advisor to the President of the United States and also the Director of the National Institute for Allergies and Infectious Diseases. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for your leadership and for all the contributions you're making. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's always a pleasure to be with you.